Okay, we're back. Um, Apologies for any interruptions. Sometimes there's internet troubles from where I'm streaming. But take two, John. So what I was talking about was it's always, the Western idea of virtue is always about the truth of the effect of action. It's not about necessarily how you get there in terms of what types of personalities are involved, what methods need to be done, trial and error, and the idea that power in and of itself is bad because people do bad things with it is really we're not going to be able to dig our way out of a lot of these issues if we keep that silly superficial mindset. So yes, Black Suit Spider-Man is an example of someone who runs amok, and I'll also admit that because these issues are unaddressed, the shadow eventually surfaces as well as the unconscious, and people get crazy, and people become criminals or do some terrible things, or find terrible addictions. We're all pretty messed up in this world, and I'm not going to act like I'm perfect either. So, but we have to start somewhere. We can't just be going around just saying, no, 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 I'm going to do exactly what everyone else is telling me, and there's nothing wrong with me, and I don't need to face these insecurities. I don't need to face these issues. And especially with our children, the younger we properly guide children and young adults into maturity and into self honesty and into hope, then the less these issues will occur. Okay, so the next character, Ichigo down there, is much more in depth. Essentially, with him, he's a superhero who is the show is based off of a mixture of Shintoism, Buddhism, and some mythology there, and he's basically this afterlife policeman, and they use like these samurai swords to purify souls and things. And the creator took that and made it his own. But what's interesting is, of course, I just learned recently that the show took a lot from the famous swordsman Miyamoto Musashi and philosopher, considered one of the best Eastern swordsmen in all of Japan and even the whole hemisphere. Um, so you can check him out. Very interesting historical figure. But when it comes to the Middle Ages, the Edo period, the samurai, there's this whole other, and of course the Taoist philosophy that was its ancestor that led up to it. Of course, Kung Fu, right? Yin and Yang, the whole intricacies behind where those martial art styles came from. There is a completely different understanding about masculine power. First of all, and this is where I'm going to go into a little bit of a rant, when things were simpler, the most important aspect of men was to be protectors in terms of morality and physical protectors. And yes, they were also breadwinners. They also had to earn money. But the other aspects were very important as well. They also, because they had a simpler life, had a more of an appreciation for beauty, for solitude, for simpler things. They didn't have these big American dream aspirations, which are honestly pretty dumb when the more you think about it. You didn't have a choice. You mostly were either a peasant or, and even if you were a samurai slash knight during the medieval times, you had someone to answer to, and real estate wasn't given out go and come. I mean, these were smaller countries. They didn't have the same ideas of freedom as we do. And because of that, those pressures, you have to look inward. You have to look into the simplicity of life, um, which actually has hidden treasures there. And part of that is understanding that what makes a man is his inner self. It's not his outer possessions. Now, his outer possessions can be a reflection of his inner self. I mean, of course, famous businessmen, famous entrepreneurs, famous fill in the blank people. The Vanderbilt, all these famous businessmen. That's what we think of men, but it wasn't just that. It could be someone that is a his charisma, his energy is a lasting impression on those he loves, or a lasting infamous impression. Right? It could be someone that really can inspire people, that can build a community, that can be a leader, or stand up to evil. Because of these simpler times, people had a better understanding of that. It could be artistry and science. A lot of these post-industrial evolution thinkers and this new American dream that started in the 80s had this cookie cutter, get your degree, get this, get this, get this, and you'll be fine, which isn't even that well proven. But aren't we standing on the shoulders of misunderstood giants? Nikola Tesla, um, Isaac Newton, Mozart. Aren't there many great men who have been completely misunderstood and persecuted, and they were only later they were appreciated? Because what happens a lot of the time is that someone who is truly in love with what their calling is often goes beyond the unconscious of people. A genius, someone that's very just super into what they do. And because they do that, the people around them don't appreciate it, because they themselves are in that cookie cutter, oh, I just got to get by mentality. Okay. And of course, you have behind me the ultimate example of that, Jesus Christ. When it comes to right and wrong, oh, brace yourselves, get ready for a whipping, right? Now you're really in trouble. But because we've lost that, our society is a mess. We have such a mess. We are imprisoned in our own prosperity, and we don't know what to do with ourselves. Yes, live to work. Thank you, John. Very, very succinct in what I'm trying to get at. So you have these, you have these. Here I go into the education system again. You have these parents raising young men, and now there's this whole feminist thing of boys playing with guns are bad. It's just out of control. But they raise men, these young men, and um, it's just the most goofy thing ever. Oh, get in the car. Oh, we have to go to work. Okay, mom. Oh, mom and dad. And they go into the car, and then the kid goes to this soulless socialist teacher, and he learns all about how it's terrible to be a white man or whatever, and how he should be a good marketing tool for Google, aka, go through math and science or become a pre-med. And then, the parents don't understand. They're like, oh, what are you doing smoking weed over there and getting into trouble? How about you come and straighten your life up? Oh, fine, and what's wrong with this kid? Doesn't he want to become successful and just like us? And then let's go talk to the psychiatrist. Oh, your kid's smoking weed, huh? Well, let me give him some Adderall, a literally stronger drug, but it's legal. It's okay. Okay, take your Adderall, kid. Listen here, dumbass. You're going to go to high school and you're going to do a good job in the SATs. Why? I don't want to do that. Because you have to become wealthy and successful. You have to. You have to. Well, I don't want to do that. No, you're going to do it now. So the kid goes through that. Then he goes to college. You're going to go to college. You're going to make a lot of money. But I'm in college debt. Well, that's just too bad. You're going to have to figure it out. uh, well, I can't find any jobs because they're all gone to China. That's just too bad. You're not working hard enough. and what happens after that is, let's see, you're at 21. Now you have to go to grad school. Why? Because bachelor's degree isn't good enough. And you go to grad school. Grad school isn't good enough. You have to get your job together, and you have to be a good advertiser. So by now you're like 26, 27. and you're like looking at the evening of your prime, and it's even especially rough on women, on young women, because now we're forcing young women to do it. It's rough on men, but uh, women, they mature differently, and from what I understand, that a man can actually handle still, be getting older and still having the energy to do things. But women have these maternal instincts, and they develop differently, and they have this biological clock thing. And so all the while, all of this is so that you can have an early retirement, go on Royal Caribbean cruise, and get fat eating chili dogs. That is the meaning of life. Now, can anyone tell me, with that little skit that I just did, what's wrong with this whole picture? I mean, you've crushed the poor nerd. I mean, all he wanted was to have some friends and maybe marry his middle school, high school crush, Susie Jones, and that's it. And people say that's a retarded, awful, uh, unevolved, toxic masculine aspiration. But what were people doing before this whole college bubble, industrial revolution thing we're doing? If you actually look at the way people live, they live very simply. Of course, they want to make money and they want to have security. That was always secondary, though. Excuse me. It was always secondary. What was the first thing people wanted? Okay, maybe these drives, and this is, I'll talk about more about the libido side of it, but maybe these drives that we look at that we're so repulsed by, and this is not proper, this is not, maybe these drives are the inner child that thirsts for love, screaming and lashing out. Can we please put this together? We're like still shocked as to why there's a porn, drugs, alcohol epidemic and a mental illness problem. And what I just said, that goofy, cold, awful prison hamster wheel, manipulative, one track thing I just said, that's what's expected by most modern Western people. And we're looking at this and we're like, I don't understand why people are so messed up. I mean, that's just scratching the surface. There's also the fact that we don't know anything about these drives, and yet they still are going to affect someone. It's essentially, if you have a bunch of sick people, and instead of giving them the proper medicine, you say you need to put on a happy face and work harder, and you'll figure it out. And it's just it's ridiculous. But that is, and I understand that most people don't consciously think that. Most people go to their job and they assume that the system will take care of all of these issues, these confidence issues, all these things. Let me open the blinds again, because apparently it's not cloudy anymore. Okay, that looks better, I guess. Better than nothing. I mean, it just goes on, and I don't want to divulge too much into this, but what is the use of this facade of materialism if you feel like you want to blow your brains out by the time you're 33? I don't understand this logic here. What is the use of doing things that you don't aren't passionate about? We're born with hearts and other organs than just one lobe of the brain. Okay, we also have souls. That's a little bit more of a theological concept, but you know, we must be deluded that we must have watched some movie with I don't know what, some stupid soap opera, reality TV, and we must have been like, yeah, that's the way it is. I'm gonna be like this overly wealthy person with like random fountains in my yard, and and I'm going to work till my bones are showing because I need to make tons of money in case of what? I don't get it. um, so what my point is that maybe the adults need to stop and look at what is in the collective unconscious of children and ask themselves, are these things really that bad? Is it really that bad that a boy is playing cowboys and Indians at 5 years old? Or get then, of course, the advanced versions, the comic books, the et cetera, so forth. Or is it really that bad that kids, eventually they start developing feelings for each other? They have these crushes, they're shy, they don't know what to do. But is it really that bad to guide them in that and to talk to them about that? Not in this, well, birds and the bees and no, I mean like actually talk about why you enjoy the company of someone else. What about that person? Maybe real there's I just feel that this is so messed up. How to actually express yourself in a confident way. Um is it really that bad that kids are like, but I don't want to have a big degree job? I don't get it. I don't care that much, but I'm on a doggy and I want to be a mommy or a daddy, and I want to live life in peace. I don't think those people are freeloading slobs. That sounds like very natural inclinations. And where is this idea that because someone isn't a go-getting businessman who counts his shekels all the time, that they can't be successful? I just listened to this lecture by Dr. Jordan Peterson, one of the guys who I watched to prepare for this, and one of the persons I mentioned in the trailer, and he said entrepreneurs and many successful people are not these go-getting corporate sharks that everyone likes to seem to peddle as as a successful person. They're often people that are very creative, artistic, and don't go with the same flow. But because they're open and creative and artistic and inventive, they often blow away a lot of these typical corporate sharks, and they're usually the guys that are making the millions of dollars. They're usually the Fortune 500 CEOs. Now, of course, they do have a work ethic, but often when you look at these kinds of people's work ethics, the people that are most successful, their work ethics is because they fell in love with with what they want. They actually wanted to do it. I really believe that even these passions that we call stupid, ironically, will make people more successful in a lot of these business ventures. If those that are listening, they're saying, "Oh, money, money, business, business." I mean, everyone knows about Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, but there's many other Elon Musk. There's many people that they really enjoy. They're busy because they want to create something amazing. I also think Donald Trump also represents that. Okay, so if you're thinking like that, I think forcing horses to water doesn't work anyway. But there's also another big moral problem. You're actually calling the simple man who just wants to live a life of love, of family and friends, who maybe wants to be selfless and just build people up on an emotional, spiritual level, you're actually calling that person a loser. How dare you? How awful of a premise is that? How awful. That could be the next Martin Luther King Jr. That could be the next martyr, great martyr who witnesses to the love of God, or or heals people. I don't know. It could be someone that is meant to be used to save us from these issues. Okay, so we have to. This is very messed up here. Plus, of course, the socialist indoctrination isn't so great either. So I've gone on and on. Now, the third part, I'm going to get into Ichigo here. So, in order to become more powerful, I know it's quite a digress, but into something else. But in order to become more powerful, he has to train a lot to become able to save his friends. But in at a certain point in the show, he learns that he is actually the monsters he's fighting. He actually has a part. He's actually part hollow, which is the monster. It's of in that he fights, and he has two different kinds of powers. One is analytical, and this isn't like an evil side or a good side. I mean, it can seem like that because battle's pretty scary, and his his nemesis, his alter ego, the hollow within him, which is basically a photo negative of him, is basically the instinctive version of himself. Looks very evil and menacing, but in order to understand this, you have to understand martial arts. In martial arts, there is a side of martial arts, and this is kind of, you can look into Bruce Lee's quotes on this and Miyamoto Musashi's. There's a side that is very analytical. You practice your moves. You have to get the technique right so you don't hurt yourself and that you get the maximum efficiency. But the rest of it is instinct. You train yourself, your subconscious, so that instinctually you move. And the more you get into the instinctual side, there's there's actually a side to the aggression within hand-to-hand combat, whether it be with swords or whatever, that becomes very bloodthirsty. It's a primordial thing, but it becomes more aggressive. But that aggressive side can be countered by a passive side. And the point of his character is that he's, in the context of the show, it's not so much that, oh, you're becoming like Spider-Man, you're becoming an evil person, you're becoming too overly confident, which is a problem because he has to control it or he will go insane. But he become kind of a rabid berserker type warrior, the berserkers from the Vikings, essentially. But it's more of, when you have lots of energy, you have to know how to direct it and respect it. You want to be the king and the horse. And there's a speech in the show which is literally based off Sigmund Freud's The King and the Horse. The king is whoever is the dominant, and the horse is the foundation. And he wants to be the king because he'll be able to control his power, his instinctive power, while not at the same time abandoning it. Okay, and that's very important. Um, that this is something that I think is very dangerous when we say, "Oh, let's only the athletic kids can become jocks, and let's leave everyone else out in the cold." And when there's a kid on a Zoom meeting who has a gun, let's call the cops. That's actually how bad we've gotten. Let's call the cops on a kid who has a toy gun on a Zoom meeting. Oh man, how we've fallen. And so, but it goes beyond that. That paradox there can be used in different walks of life. It doesn't have to be fighting, right? It could be tapping, looking at, see, because he hates the hollow. The hollow is like a mixture of the shadow and the libido in this show. So he hates it. He's like, oh, it's completely unlike me, which isn't completely true because it's part of him. It's aggressive. It doesn't care. It's maniacal. It's just wants to lash out and tear things up. I want to hold back. I want to spare my enemies. I want to have good judgment. I don't want to do friendly fire. And so, and I don't know, maybe some people in the military can understand this. You have to have that control, but nevertheless, there's that morality side. You don't want to hurt innocent people, and you also may not want to kill your enemy dead necessarily. Or you may want, you may not want to become vengeful. But what if we applied that to, let's say, a kid who is socially awkward, who doesn't want to be assertive because that's not like him, but he knows that he has to have some kind of assertion in order to get along. And this is what a lot of men in college, they have these ridiculous pickup artist gurus on how to get girls, bro. They have these charlatans giving fake advice on how to tap into your shadow, while by basically becoming a jerk. And that's part of the whole toxic masculinity thing. But that's not the toxic part. Is the fact that they want to use it for the powers of bad, and that imitating someone completely is stupid. Okay, I even see this in religious circles. Some people want to like literally copy a saint, and I'm like, wait a minute. Look at St. Jerome and St. Augustine. Both of them are saints, two different guys. Look at the apostles. Look at the variety of different personalities that may not be agreeable to each other. They might be shadows of each other. but the Lord still used them to build the kingdom of God. And of course, they're not always right, so we kind of need to work together. Okay? So, what I'm suggesting is that we need to look more into not taking away the individual and who they but are there things they could integrate into these understandings of archetypes and into their natural power, um, in order to harness that energy into what they want, not to just reckless abandon and do energy for the sake power for the sake of power, right? Which is a problem, and that's what eventually what can happen. It can quickly be corrupted. But if, let's say, someone who's meant to be a musician harnesses the power that he doesn't really like, he doesn't want to really get into advertising. He thinks advertising stupid. But some good guy says, "No, you should learn advertising. What's a way how would you advertise the music you make? What do you want to bring out of people with your music?" Perhaps that person can take something that he normally wouldn't like doing and still use it while maintaining the king, the primary drive. Okay, that's the shadow. Now, on the libido side, it's even more important. Okay, now Freud diagnosed the libido problems, but his methods were terrible. Terrible. I mean, this guy was kind of whacked out. He didn't have it all together, but the idea that there is, within men, of course, a drive to reproduce, a drive to protect, all of this hormonal stuff. That's actually a very beautiful thing. If you cut aside, if we just cut aside all of our sins just for a second, um, we can see that there's that this stuff is really important. I mean, really important. Okay, so again, in these characters, especially with Ichigo, um, that's more of the aggression versus passivity. Okay, in sword fighting, you can't be pure um, aggression because you'll just run into the guy's sword. Because with the sword, once you get stabbed with the thing, it's over. But at the same time, you have to be aggressive because the more instinctual you are, the more you might intimidate your opponent, make them make a mistake, or overwhelm them with, stamina. If you slash fast enough or you overwhelm them and intimidate them, you can get in a good blow. But if you go too far, you see what I'm saying? And that's where Miyamoto Musashi comes in. And there's all kinds of philosophy the Japanese have created via their sword fighting, and then they also have like this archery thing. I forgot the name of it, but it's like actually a philosophical. They like draw the bow very slowly, and there's really out there philosophical Zen Buddhist stuff about it. But it's interesting, and it's interesting. A lot of elderly Japanese people do this stuff too, so it's actually part of their tradition. But I think that's an important understanding. It's like, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater here. Now, finally, this whole idea of good versus evil is the way we look at it. The way we look at the way we see the elections with who's bad and who's good. A lot of confusion there. Is that, oh, it's aggressive? Maybe there's a part of us that was pillaged by the Huns and the Mongols. Maybe it's an inner psychological thing, just like how we're afraid of snakes and things, that makes us kind of scared of aggressive type people. Maybe some of us live in rough neighborhoods. I don't know, but um, the villain of Ichigo is perfect. He's this guy who has the ability to hypnotize. He wears glasses. He's just this glasses wearing normal white guy, and he actually wants to rule the world, etc. The usual comic book villain problem. Except instead, he wants to become. He's kind of like this mad scientist, and he wants to create this. He creates this crystal that turns him into basically some kind of transcendental being, and everything he does is so suave and charismatic. I mean, this, he's a pretty boy. He knows what he's talking about. He's a total narcissist, right? And yet he's a terrible person, right? And then you have Ichigo over here, who is a grunt, a burping grunt, and he's aggressive and he has this crazy monster thing in him. But in the end, what makes Ichigo able to defeat them is totally integrating his energy into himself to the point where he can properly control it without losing his mind or making mistakes, and he completely slaps the guy around. And then in the end, the guy turns into a monster. The villain turns into a monster because he loses his sense of control. His narcissist image is shattered. He's losing to this kid. I mean, there's other villains where you have this, but I just love the dynamics between, what you thought was black is now white. What you thought was white was now black, right? And, if you go by personality types as your good versus evil, you would accidentally mislabel either of these characters. But in the end, the bad guy, of course, is the one who uses people to get what he wants, and he manipulates things and all kinds of things, even though he's suave and cool. And the good guy is the one who has his inner demons, has his flaws, but still wants to protect his friends. Okay, and I think very few people think like this. Maybe we're getting a glimpse of it in Donald Trump versus the Democrats. We are getting a glimpse of that right now as a country, as a vindication of what I'm saying. But this needs to be understood. And again, the final thing that I want to get into is you see, the shadow, the Jungian stuff, all this psychoanalytical stuff. And I looked at Fulton Sheen's, if you can check out Fulton Sheen's lectures on the treasures of the subconscious, he goes into these theories. But there's one more thing we're forgetting. When you look at, especially little kids, they have an eye for beauty and their childlike wonder. There's something there. And even if we figured this stuff out and we became much better people, we have to have a meaning behind it. And I think the final level is, what is the meaning of life when it comes to the ultimate purpose of a person? Especially if you do negation, where you look at what can be taken away. As we see things being taken away in our society with this COVID lockdown and the economy and all this corruption going on, a lot of people are messed up because they're like, well, if I don't have all these things that they said I was meant to achieve and to collect, that makes my value. If I don't have my drugs, my sex, my possessions, my monetary success, my social status, if I can't, what is the point of me? What is the point of me? And it's awful that there are people that think that. But this is this is what happens when you take God out of the equation. You see, I believe there is a psychological way to look at God and the saints, the psychological archetypes. Like, for example, what does Mary Magdalene at the cross represent? What does Jesus represent and the cross represent? All of this can be applied to very common psychological realities that everyone struggles with. You know, all of this. I think that there is part in theology of this, but when everything can be taken away, there's one other frontier you have to tap into that many people do not ever or want to or will tap into. And that is doing something for the intrinsic good of it. Okay? That is, I think it's some of these these things we think are stupid. Like, for example, when you talk to a kid about his action figure, a little boy about his action figure, and he says, why do you like Batman or something? And he says, well, that's really cool. We roll our eyes inside. We're like, oh, whatever. That's just the word they throw around. But maybe that's deeper than we realize. Because in our utilitarian minds, and utilitarianism, by the way, if you're a Christian, you need to get rid of utilitarianism. Has nothing to do with Christianity. It's part of a watered down version of it. But when you really look at it, the Nazis were utilitarian. Be careful with this Oh, how do you are you contributing member of society stuff? Very dangerous and very cold, by the way. Just on an emotional level, very cold way to look at things. But so he says he likes Batman. It's cool. Well, why go into all these other complicated things? Okay. Yeah, yes, Sweet Harmony. I was too. While I was praying the Rosary, very emotional moment. Along with you guys, I was Sweet Harmony was talking about the archetypes. I might make a different show on that. Maybe Thomas and I can do that. But it's very important, spiritually speaking. Um, so I guess that was the Holy Spirit there. We were just thinking of the same things. But let me just finish off with this. So what's wrong with saying that something's really cool or beautiful? What's wrong with that? I think there's a neurosis in and of itself when you want to constantly dissect something. Let's carve into it. Let's dissect it. Let's shred it up. What's the use of this? Why is it ticking? Why isn't it doing this? It's like, wait a minute. God created the world and said it was good. Perhaps it's just a beautiful thing. And even on matters of sexuality, that's the big, scary 800-pound gorilla Godzilla in the room. Everyone's scared of it. People are scared of, people want to either be hedonists or they want to be overly scrupulous about it. And I think the middle way is, a lot of people say, oh, well, none of the passions matter. You just get married because it's a contract. And and other people say, it's just for fun. I think we're both ignoring the point that, man, we want to see the ultimate beauty. We all want to see the ultimate good. That is the final thirst that sadly many people do not have anymore. That's why I believe the Bible verse says one must be like a child of God to enter the kingdom of heaven. I think that's where that verse comes in, you know. Um, and you look at what a lot of people do with all their materialism, and they want to go, younger people at least get it. They want to go to parties to see beautiful people. They don't really want to, the music's nice, but they want to meet some charismatic, interesting people to have friends, maybe a love interest, who knows, right? But then you have these weirdos who have parties for the sake of having a party. Oh, we had a party, especially with the older people. They're just like, why are we here? I don't know. We had a cool party. Um, so you see, I hope people are understanding what I'm getting at here. I think cracking this door open carefully and with prudence and with wisdom, not too quickly, not too slowly, will unveil the true holistic psychology of healing that has been completely co-opted by leftists and messed up people with really serious issues of narcissism and solipsism. I do believe there is a selfless, loving psychology on human beings that Archbishop Fulton Sheen and many other great thinkers and philosophers and psychologists, I think there is a good side that can purify these bad sides and make it less of a boogeyman. Aren't we so tired of being pushed around by our own ignorance, our own lack of understanding on why we tick? you know so that's my spiel for today. It went off on a tangent. um I just want of one more point to make in all of this. um I think that these archetypes, these psychological realities, what young men go through, um, they will only truly be tampered by talking about spirituality, because one of the main inner drives there that a lot of these we want to preserve is the what I just said, the drive to protect the beautiful and the good, which is actually connected to God because God is goodness. And if you don't talk about God, then the man is bound to the peace of the world, and that will still lead to despair. So if something can be taken away and is temporal, then he will still be a slave to that, even if he has good intentions. I mean, I struggle with that. I struggle with detachment, but we have to teach that there is an inner liberation, that where if you see God as the ancient beauty, as Saint Augustine says, and if a man can look at a woman and not just think that woman is a piece of meat for me to indulge myself looking at her, not or not just, oh, a mother who I can have a family with, that's a little bit better, but they look at God, they look at woman, and they see God's beauty through that woman's beauty. They see the glimpse into the infinite. And of course, once they can do that, maybe that's a good test run. You can start doing that with other people. You can do that with the homeless man in the street, with the enemy that or the guy that really annoys you, pisses you off, but maybe you can find some good in him, or maybe your mom and dad, or your family, or this person you need to forgive. You see, but there has to be deeper meaning than you are meant to be someone who has families. That's it. At best, maybe not even that anymore. Um, I think that's much deeper, richer. It takes us out of the animal kingdom. It takes us out of facts and figures, and you're a number, and you're a robot, and you're and all this stuff. I think that can liberate us from this. That's what's why we're all creeped out. A lot of us on the HHL, we feel kind of creeped out by the world, and a lot of other people are too. They're like, there's something wrong with the way we're doing things. And that's we don't intrinsically do things anymore. We don't do things intrinsically for the beauty of them. You know, let's simplify a little bit. Let's not get too heady. Let's not become a Nazi super scientist about everything. Maybe and that's another. Lastly, I remember reading the theology of the body, right? And also looked up a traditional article about marriage, and said the first reason for marriage is to reproduce. That's the primary reason, and to have kids. The second is for the man and the wife to grow in love. But my issue with that was, yes, that's true, but I think there's a super primary reason. There's an even higher, and I think that the truest reason to have a family, or to do anything, is to find love and to give love. Okay, and in that, in that, God is there to see God, right? Our final end. What's the point of we have these divorce rates, right? What's the point of a marriage that has no passion to teach each other and the children about beauty and love and peace? See, I think even within our own, what we think is the solution, oh, just have kids or whatever, can often bring us back to the same problem, and we're scratching our heads and we're like, but I thought it was supposed to work. Okay. No, I think, like, look at the Martin family, Saint Therese of Lisieux. They were people of love. So my answer to this traditional article is, if you're not raising saints and raising each other to be saints, which means people of love and humility, it doesn't just mean people that are okay, they have their nose clean, then in God's eyes, that's nothing. It really isn't. Um, Again, I think that if we really look at our own philosophies and spiritualism and theology and how people thought before the Industrial Revolution, we have really emptied ourselves of what really matters. So, okay, that is my last final addendum to everything. Hope you guys have a great rest of the Saturday. God bless. Thanks for coming out. And hope to see you next time on this show and Utopiana at 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll be talking about Pope Francis' approval of homosexual civil unions, maybe will tap more into this kind of things now that I think about it. Um, maybe LGBT people need salvation. LGBT people need healing. We don't hate them. We want them to be happy kids, just like everyone else. We want everyone. We. It's not about hatred, but we don't need to condone that brokenness. We don't need to tell the alcoholic it's okay to keep drinking.